Good day everyone, Abyssful of Goats here, and welcome back to every card from main booster sets reviewed. Now, every once in a while we get a unique set in Yu-Gi-Oh! That is so powerful it essentially invalidates most of what came before it. These are sets like Invasion of Chaos, Duelist Alliance, and Power of the Elements. And today we look at Spell Ruler, or Magic Ruler if you're like me, the first of such sets. This one set introduced so many powerful spells to the game, essentially made all but the best cards from the last two boosters utterly redundant, making Yu-Gi-Oh! A two-deck game for the next couple of years, as many decks seen play were hand control decks that use the set spells to empty the opponent's hands, and very fast aggro decks that can win in the top deck war. But broken, undertested spells are not the only thing this has to offer, as it also got a mix up in terms of monster quality, with several of its cards being played until Edison format even. And we also saw the first set to have good equipped cards. There's lots to talk about here, so without any further ado, let's begin. So the first card of this set is the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon, and yes, we start on the hunt for a good secret rare in case you're wondering. However, as they're all similar, we'll cover all the Toon monsters in this set in one entry, that being Toon Blue Eyes, Toon Summon Skull, Toon Mermaid, and for some reason, Manga Ryuran. Now all these toons pretty much share the same summoning conditions and effects, that being that to summon them you need to have the spell Toon World in play, they need Toon World to stay on the field, they can't attack the turn they're summoned, and when they attack, it costs 500 life points, and finally if the opponent controls no toons, you can attack directly, but you must attack any toons your opponent controls. So before talking about these cards individually, I will say their complete reliance on Toon World made a dedicated toon deck something that could never be competitively viable at the time, as one well-timed back row hit could cripple the entire deck. As such, a dedicated toon deck remained exclusively something you'd see at kitchen tables and locals until the new spell was released years later. Now that being said, two of these monsters did see play in some other decks. First we have Toon Blue Eyes White Dragon, which is seen play in several OTK strategies, if believe it or not, involving the card Royal Magical Library. You see, the goal of these decks is to play as many spells as possible in a single turn and draw your whole deck, usually winning with Exodia. And one easy way to do this was to use Toon Table of Contents and another Toon card. So the idea is to go through all three tables with their own effect, and then a fourth card, thinning your deck by 3 cards, and letting it draw with the library. So where does Blue Eyes Toon Dragon come into this? Well, some decks would use Toon Worlds as their final card they would search, as well as meaning the spell counter for the library. However, some other players use the Blue Eyes Toon Dragon as their search target instead, as they can be discarded for trade-in, which gives the library another counter and draws you 2 additional cards. As for Toon Mermaid, this is the only one of the original Toon lineup to ever actually be summoned in a semi-competitive deck, although it wouldn't come about for another decade later with the release of Toon Goldfish, and more importantly, Totally Awesome and Muhammad Shark. The idea of this deck was to make Toad using Mermaid and Alligator to go into Muhammad Shark, along with cards like Rescue Rabbit and the aforementioned Goldfish. Now admittedly, calling this deck competitive is pushing it a bit, but it's the only time any of these original Toon monsters saw any play in at all, so they're worthy to talk about. Overall, none of the first wave of Toons are really that good, but at least they have seen a little bit of play unlike many cards in this time period. In addition to this, their iconic cards have both been childhood favourites of many players and for being well played in the anime. So overall, I will say I do like these cards a lot for their art style and memorability, regardless of their questionable quality. Okay, so this card is pretty awful, as all it does is shuffle your graveyard back into the deck upon being milled, essentially the worst possible Shizu card if you will. However, there is one thing about this card, and that's how weird the card is written. I put up the text on screen so you can see it, and to be honest, did you need to read this card more than once to know what it did? Because I know I sure did. Next. Okay, we now have gotten the first good booster secret rare in this set, but we did get a historical first in the form of Axe of Despair, the first good equip card. A simple yet powerful effect for the time, the Axe grants the cards equipped with a 1000 point attack point buff. In addition to this, and a theme we'll see in this set with many equips, is that it was also recurable, as it could be added back to the top of your deck when it was destroyed at the cost of treating a monster. Now I'll be honest, the recursion effect will rarely come up, as 1, it costs a monster, which back in those days was a big ask, and 2, it can't be used whenever you want, having to be triggered on destruction, so many times it will stack your deck when you'd rather draw a new card. However, it could also be used as to tribute off cards like Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest to trigger their effects, so I guess it wasn't all bad. Now the reason this card was so good was the 1000-point buff it gave a monster, which gave aggro decks a little boost from going against hand control. Because for example, a Gemini Elf equipped with this card would be a 3-turn clock on an empty board, and something that could play through having most of your hand ripped apart. More on that later. This card would continue to see play through the early 2000s as a power boost in rogue beatdown decks, before seeing its biggest success in Ben-K OTK decks, as a way of pumping up the aforementioned Am Samurai, so you could sack multiple times and one-shot the opponent. Also, one last note about this card, it's one of the few cards that got heavily censored in the TCG. Here are the two cards for comparison if you want to look, but to be honest, I generally think that this card looks better in the censored version. I know this face is supposed to be creepy, but I laugh every time I see it. Overall, most early equips weren't very good, and most either never saw play or only saw brief amounts of play. So when we get cards like this, it's definitely something to remember. Pity the rest of the equips in this set weren't very good. Speaking of which, on the flip side of the equip spectrum, we have Black Pendant, which when equipped grants the monsters equipped to a 500-point boost. In addition to this, it also burns the opponent for 500 points when sent to the graveyard, essentially making this card a reinforcement on an equip and a Hinotama rolled into one. But unfortunately, neither of those cards were seeing any play at this point, and mixing them together didn't make them strong enough to see play either. Now, Black Pendant isn't a bad card for the time, far from it. It's just that this is a case of being okay at two things, while not being great at anything, as if you want an equip, you'd be better off playing Axe of Despair or Horn of the Unicorn, and if you wanted a burn effect, you'd be better off with Just Desserts, Ukaz, Your Tremendous Fire. As such, this card isn't good in equip decks that want bigger monsters, or burn decks that want not only higher amounts of damage for their burn effects, but also burn effects they can trigger on command. As such, this card went without a home and never saw any play. Pity. Now, Axe of Despair is a great equip for the time, and Black Pendant was at least somewhat usable. The same cannot be said for Horn of Light, as this equip only increases the defense points of a monster, which in the grand scheme of things really isn't as impactful as attack point boosting, as no opponent with a brain is going to attack a monster they can see that has higher defense. As such, the only use for this card was to keep big monsters alive longer. However, in a format that includes Maida Bug, Fisher and Regeki, this card really wasn't much help in that department either. However, what makes this card even worse is its other effect, which allows you to put it back on top of your deck for the cost of 500 life points when it's destroyed. Again, this effect is awful anyway, as it just stacks your deck and blanks your next draw, but at least with other cards in this set with the same effect, you're getting a somewhat decent power boost out of the deal. Overall, Horn of Light is one of the worst equips ever made, and by far the worst from this set. You're better off just going with the Unicorn's Horn if you want a Horn equip spell. Next up in the lineup of spell rule equip cards, we have Malevolent Nuzzler, or as I call it, the Good Horn of Light. Like Horn, this card puts itself back on top of the deck at the cost of 500 life points when sent to the graveyard, but unlike Horn, the boost it grants is sometimes worth paying this cost to use it again, as it gave a monster a 700 point attack buff, and there's no quite enough Axe of Despair to see why at this time period that was pretty good. Again, however, the downside of not being able to control when this card floats to the top of your deck is still pretty bad, as if you weren't careful, it could easily brick you out of a good draw for the next turn. However, like I said, the perf is still a little bit better than Horn of Light, so let's give it that at the very least. Up next, we have another famous card from the anime in Spellbinding Circle, a card that ironically has Shadow Spell's effect in the anime. A continuous trap, this card prevents the monster of its targets from attacking or changing its battle position. Another simple effect, and sadly like Black Pendant, one far too weak to see much competitive play upon release, despite being okay for the time. Honestly, this card came out in the Yugi starter deck or in the LOB set, I'm sure it would have seen some play, with removal options being so limited. However, by this time we had 6 main deck ways to remove problematic monsters, making this card already redundant by the second set. However, at least this card got some time in the anime, and the TCG version has cool art, which is more than many cards in this era got. Next. Okay, this card was a decent early game card in Fun Memories, as a Metal Fusion. Otherwise, not only is this card a bad vanilla tribute, it's vanilla tribute with worse stats than some 4-star monsters in this set. Next. And now we've got another interesting card to talk about, in Electric Snake. A card you would never summon, the snake has the ability that when it's discarded by the opponent, it allows you to draw 2 cards. This card has never seen play, however I'm wondering if it could. We've seen it powerful since the Serpent has been in GOAT format as a way to deal with things like Delinquent Duo, and this card essentially makes the opponent go -1 for playing it. Again, not saying this card is great, but something to consider in GOAT, maybe? I'm not sure. Next. Okay, what the heck is this? Not only does this card attribute summon monster with the same defense as Gen Soldier of Stone, it actually has less attack points, as in a much worse type attribute combo. I wouldn't need to explain to you why this card is bad, right? Next. Okay, next we have Amoeba, the first in a series of cards that make me wonder if Creature Swap would want to come out a lot earlier than it actually did. You see, while this card is weak, it has a decent burn effect, inflicting 2000 damage to the opponent. The catch? It has to be sent to the opponent's side of the field to cause the burn damage, and I have no idea how you're pulling that off with no Creature Swap in the format yet, as I'm pretty sure my opponent wouldn't be dumb enough to snatch steal this. So a mediocre effect made awful by an almost impossible activation condition. Go to see that a lot in this set. Next. Really, Konami? Another bad vanilla tribute with stats that will be okay on level 4? With 3 sets in and you're still doing this? I have nothing else to say about this other than it's very lazy ass named here as well. Next. Now, many people may not realise this, but there was a short time when Maha Vilo saw a little bit of competitive play. A level 4 spellcaster, Vilo gains an additional 500 points for each card equipped to him. Now we've seen this set comes with many good equips for the time, like Axe of Despair, so it wasn't an awful idea to just search this off of Witch of the Black Forest, and then pump it up so it could take out our opponent in 2 to 3 hits. Kinda like a pseudo Ben K, if you will. Now was the strategy consistent or top tier? No, not even close. But was it fun to pull off? Oh yeah. And that's all needs to be said here. Next. Up next we have Guardian of the Throne Room, the first in a series of 1650 beaters from this set. Now in all honesty, none of these cards are that good, as with cards like Legion and Battle Ox already available, these cards were somewhat redundant before they even came out. However, I don't think that these cards were good for one type of player back in the day, and that was budget players, as these cards, plus Legion, Ox and Summon Skull, were the cheapest way back in the day of making a decent deck without buying, at the time, expensive cards like Sangan, Witch of the Black Forest, etc. Again, I know these cards were not anything amazing, even for the time, but they were decent beaters for beginners, and I'll give them some credit for that at least. We'll get that somewhere after all. Repeat most of what I said about the last entry and it applies here as well, but I need to mention this card specifically because of the weird mix of type and attribute this card has, being, I'm pretty sure, the only Fire Aqua pairing in this game's history. If I'm wrong about that, I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments below, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, nothing else to say. Next. Okay, so we saw Electric Snake earlier, and I mentioned it could potentially see play as a companion to Sinister Serpent in some GOAT decks. I can also do the same thing for this other card with the same condition, as when my Nana is sent from the hand to grave for the opponent's card effect, it burns them for 1000 points. Now don't get me wrong, the idea of turning Confiscation to a 2k burn spell is kind of funny, but nowhere near good enough to justify playing this bricky card. Next. Everything I said about Amoeba applies here as well, except Griggle is even worse, because instead of burning, he gains you life points instead. He was decent food material for memories though, so he got that going from him at the very least. Next. Yes, I checked this time, this card is actually a dragon. Sorry for the mistake in the LOB video. Honestly, nothing to say about this card in itself, just another bad tribute monster, but I did want to just correct that mistake from the first episode. Next. This guy is just dark grey, fully grown up, and just as youthful as him. Next. Okay, now you'd think this card would just be a crap vanilla, and you'd be right. But Dark Witch did indeed see play as exactly one competitive deck, and that was a version of Extra Deck Monarchs, as this card could be used with Return of the Monarchs and Brilliant Fusion to gain extra effects, by attributing the Gimlet Seraphonite for a bonus effect even under Rivalry of Warlords. MBT has a video on this explaining it if you want more details about it. Also, big further fail on this card is neither a Dark Monster nor a Spellcaster, so literally is not a Dark Witch. Next. How do you make a card that gives you 2 battle phases near unplayable? You tack it onto a flip monster that requires the opponent to have a very specific card on the field, that's how. Like I said, whether the report does indeed give you an extra battle phase if it flips and destroys a sword to the revealing light controlled by the opponent. Oh, is that all? You sure you don't need me to give a blood sacrifice as well? I'm not going to dignify this card. Next! A bad vanilla that wasn't even future material for memories. Next! A bad vanilla that wasn't even good in memories and a tribute to boot. Next! Bad in the real game, bad in forbidden memories, and just looks like liquid shit. Next. On flip, this card lets the opponent draw 3 cards and pitch any spells they draw. Obviously an awful effect, as you don't want to even risk your opponent drawing 3 cards, but this guy did see it play to play in Duel Links in a mill strategy due to the game's lower power ceiling and 20 card deck limit, so at least he was good somewhere, I suppose. Next. Literally just Protector of the Throne Room but a water monster. Everything I said there still applies here. Next. On flip, this card lets us creature swap with our opponent. And this would be a pretty good effect were it not for one line. It can't use this effect during the battle phase, meaning you literally have to set this card, pray it doesn't get attacked on your opponent's turn, and then flip it next to him for a creature swap. Or you cannot be an idiot and just play Snatch Steal, which is in the same set. Next. It's just the last 2 650 monsters but are dark, which I guess can make it better because it's probably one of the better attributes, but nothing else much to say. Next. And now we have one of the worst cards in this set, Slot Machine. Nothing much to say about this one. It's a 2000 attack monster that requires 2 tributes. Now, it already would be Curse of Dragon bad if it was just 1 tribute, as it would be outclassed by Summoned Skull for that cost. But for they have the nerve to ask for 2 tributes for this guy is just insulting. Not going to waste my time with this guy anymore. Next. So we got the first good equip in this set, and another first we got was the introduction of Ritual Monsters, a series of blue bordered cards whose gimmick was they needed both a ritual spell and a sacrifice to summon them. As you can imagine, this combination of hard to find spells and high costs made most of them unplayable at the time, with taking over 10 years for the set to see any play. That was except for one card, Relinquished, the ace monster of the anime's first villain, the glorious Maximilian Pegasus. You see, what made this card good was 1, his ritual, Black Wisdom Ritual, only needed 1 star's worth of monsters to summon him, so literally any monster would do, and 2, he actually had a really powerful effect. You see, Relinquish essentially was the first example of powerful non-destruction removal, as whilst it's equipped, it can absorb 1 opponent monster and set it into an equipped card, taking that monster's points. This not only removes any monster without destroying it, it also makes this card hard to beat in battle because it can use those monsters it stole as shields to not only stay alive, but make the opponent take any battle damage from that kind of battle. This card was not ever fully meta, but it has seen since the playability over the years, from Chaos variants in Gold format to a Kaiju absorbing deck in 2016, and its archetype gives one of the most powerful cards in the game's history, like Thousand Eyes Restrict and Millennium Eyes Restrict. So overall, yeah, a really good set for ritual monsters. Should the rest of them in this set absolutely suck? Oh well. Another weak vanilla whose only claim to fame has been the inspiration for Toon Mermaid. Next. Why was this card even designed? It was designed to counter cards like Horn and Nuzzler, because otherwise I can't see what use this effect has other than being just annoying. It won't prevent any attacks, it just makes you waste a resource to do so. No, just to say really, it's not a really good store card, it's just a mild inconvenience and very annoying. Next. Okay, so Curse of Fiend is another unremarkable card. All it does is change every monster's battle position and prevents them from turning back for the turn. But the bizarre thing about this card is that it can only be done during the standby phase, and this is the only non-quick play spell that can be used at this point. Again, nothing interesting about this card overall, but it's a good indication of how messed up early card design was. Next. Put this card to 3 already, please Konami. Sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Anyway, Upstart Goblin is one of the best non-broken cards from this set, allowing you to draw a card at the cost of giving your opponent 1000 life points, which, as I've made clear in other videos, is barely a cost at all. Now, it took a while for this card to see play, admittedly, with cards like Pot of Greed running around, but eventually, when those cards got banned, people realised that playing 3 of this card to make a 37 card deck rather than a 40 card deck was really good consistency, and this card saw play for many years until it was put to 1 and then power crept later on. And at this point, I think I can come back to 3 and be fine. Next card. So next up we have the first of what I like to call the tax spells from this set, which are continuous spells that force players to pay a small cost to perform certain game actions. We already saw one of these with Gravekeeper's Servant, but let's get some good ones. In this case we have Toll, which forces players to pay 500 points per attack. Now this effect by itself isn't that bad early game, or if your opponent only has one monster, but if you can get multiples of this card on the field against an opponent with a few monsters on board, trust me, the damage will build up very quickly, and you're likely to be able to win the game with a couple of burn spells on top of it. Which is what a few gold players have done with Tax or Toll Burn, which uses regular burn cards along with this card and another tax effect I'm going to talk about later, basically making a burn deck it's actually even more annoying. Sure, this deck hasn't been much of a meta threat in Goat, with many better burn decks available, but at least this card and its ilk have had some play, which is again more than a lot of cards in the set can see. Question: how bad does a card have to be literally Dark Hole and Heavy Storm in one card and be completely unusable? Well, here's Final Destiny to answer that question, because yes, this card does indeed destroy every card on the field, which could be extremely powerful in the right hands. So what's the catch? You need to discard 5 cards from your hand to use this effect. What? So yeah, again, I don't think I need to elaborate much here of why this card is so bad. Because usually when you activate this card, it's an instant loot loss, as it leaves your opponent with their hand, while you likely have nothing unless you have a couple of grave effects. But even then you're still likely to lose the resource game, as your opponent still has a couple of cards in their hand at minimum. I'd also like to remind everybody that Dark Hole and Raigeki was still legal when this card came out, as if it couldn't get any worse. I mean, what more do we need to say about this card? Next! And now we get to start with the good stuff. The first of 6, yes, 6 cards in this set that are still banned to this day, 20 years after this set came out. And first we have one of the 3 cards here to be banned multiple times. It's Snatch Steal. An equipped spell, Snatch Steal allows us to take control of the equipped monster, however there is a cost of giving your opponent 1000 life points during each of their turns. Now I think we all know that giving your opponent life points isn't really a downside by this point, and what that cost gives us is literally a better change of heart, as not only can we take any monster our opponent controls, but if it's good we get to keep it as opposed to attributing it or using its extra material like with change of heart. Like I said, this card was banned twice, the first time after Goat format and the second time 8 years later after Necros format, and over that time taking any monster and can do whatever you want with it was still broken good. So yeah, I doubt we'll ever see this card back again after those 2 fiascos, especially with Change of Heart back now, but this card has definitely left a massive impact on the game. Well, I can say that Chorus of Sanctuary's got beautiful artwork at least, which I've used as a background in my videos several times on this channel. However, the effect is kinda mediocre, as all it does is increase the defense of all defense position monsters by 500. Now this is better than Horn of Light, as it will power up face down monsters once they're flipped, and if you had to come out from the first... Up next we have the second of 3 cards Konami hit, unhit, and then hit again, Confiscation, which is also another first in a trilogy for this set, and it's the first of the broken as hell, unfun hand attack cards from this set. As simple as it gets, Confiscation allows the user to pay 1000 life points to look at their opponent's hand and send 1 card in it to the graveyard. A powerful effect, this card gives any deck both perfect hand information to make better plays with, and a non-targeting piece of removal for anything that it can't deal with the cards in their hand. In fact, the only surprising thing about this card is it's the least good hand attack card in this set, with both Delinquent Duo and particularly the Forceful Sentry being much more powerful. Remember that for a second, will you? There's a reason that this card's been banned since the last time the UK had a good Prime Minister, and it's unlikely we'll ever see it back again. In fact, the only other interesting thing to know about this card is it hides the difference between Yugioh and other TCGs like Magic the Gathering, which have several cards like Confiscation that do see play, but are not considered overpowered in any way due to the game's slower pace and mana system. Next. And speaking of hand attack cards that are even more powerful than Confiscation, coming up next we have the Bane of Goat format Delinquent Duo. Another card that costs 1000 life points to use. This card doesn't give its user control over what's discarded, which may make it seem worse on the surface, but it makes it for that by swapping not one, but two cards of the opponent's hand, as it makes you discard a card from their hand at random, and then makes them pick another card to discard, essentially making you go +1, and being the most powerful turn 1 play you can do in Goat format often. This card is so meta-warping in fact that cards like Sinister Serpent, and in some cases Regenerating Mummy, see play in this format just to counter Duo, and bringing this card back Magician of Faith is a good way to get slapped in Goat. Banned since Goat ended, it's again unlikely this card will ever see the light of day again, but it is the only banned card to see a reprint in modern times due to Goat's popularity, which is pretty cool on Konami's part, I must say. Curse you, Master Rule 4. In addition to ruining many good decks, having several of the worst formats in the game's history, and trying to kill my beloved Burning Abyss, you also took this meme from us. A normal spell, Darkness Approaches with a cost of 2 discard, flips a monster face down. Nothing special, in fact this is probably the worst Book of Moon effect ever made, as it's a -2 in card advantage, and it's non-quick play on top of that. But it did have one unique aspect to it, and that is it didn't change the monster's position when flipping it. Which yes, made this the only card that could put a monster in face down attack mode, something that caused no end of ruling nightmares I assure you, but also made the card somewhat unique in legendary and bad Yu-Gi-Oh circles. But then Lynx reared their ugly head and this card had to be errated to prevent them from being Book of Mooned. Ugh, what a shame. So in this set, as we'll see shortly, we have the first good what we call Battle Trick spells, or quick play spells that help the monster in battle by either boosting its stats or decreasing the opponent's, and I'm guessing that is what Fairy's Hand Mirror here was designed to counter, as the only target removal anyone was playing at the time was Fisher, a card this card wouldn't work on. Unfortunately, that is the main reason for this card seeing no play, as for all the time it would have been playable, it had so few targets, it was a brick more often than it was an answer to something. This might have been a good pick in a sealed event if those were an actual thing by the time, but I can't see any, at least for this card, in a main deck in the game. Hey look, it's the best Guardian card ever made! Okay, jokes aside, this card is more or less Fairy's Hand Mirror for equips. However, I would argue this card is slightly better due to the amount of good equips to play after the set, as being able to use Satch Steal on multiple monsters or saving an equip if your monster's about to die was actually pretty decent in Metal Raiders format. Again, this card is kind of niche to bad, but unlike Mirror, at least it has some place, kinda. Speaking of Fairy's Hand Mirror, up next we have the only good target for the mirror in Rush Recklessly. A quick play spell, Rush gives one monster a 700 attack point buff, a simple effect but one surprisingly powerful and versatile in early Yu-Gi-Oh! Now obviously this card's primary use at the time was in aggro decks, to pump up beaters like Lajian and later Gemini Elf, so that these cards could more easily win before being overwhelmed by the control deck's card advantage. However, it also had uses in said control decks, as often a 700 point buff could be enough to sneak through damage with a Masked Sorcerer or White Magical Hat, to either rip a card out of the opponent's hand or add one to your own, as well as ensure these monsters survived in battles with opposing big beaters. In fact, as simple as this card is, it's surprising how much it could do at the time, from helping aggro win battles, to giving control decks more resources, and it was also a good pseudo-trap card, and a nasty surprise to buff which the Black Forest or Sangines in battles with cards like Battleox or Lajin, before securing you another card. Now this card did not remain relevant for too long, with control decks becoming even more powerful over the next year, but for being such a powerful yet simple effect in early Yu-Gi-Oh! I've got to give this card some props. Unfortunately, as good as Reckless was as a combat trick, that's how bad the reliable Guardian was, as like Rush it grants 700 point buffs in battle, but this time it's the defense points, which as we discussed in the Horn of Light entry is nowhere near as good, as all you can really do with this card is use it as a powerful pseudo-trap to buff up your big 2k defensive walls. But again, even as a battle trap, it's outclassed by the role in the role by Rush Recklessly, which can do so much more. Again, sorry, not a very good card. And now we get to our final entry in the No Fun Hand Attack Club, and we saved the worst for last with the Forceful Sentry. So we've seen with Confiscation and Duo how broken hand attack cards are from this set, yet I'd absolutely argue that this was the worst of the bunch. Firstly, unlike Confiscation and Duo, both of which ask for 1000 life points, Sentry has no such cost, and yes, that cost usually doesn't matter, but it's still insane to me that by far the strongest of these cards is the one you can play at any point in the game. So why do this is stronger than the other two spells? Because even though it only hits one card as opposed to Duo's two, where it sends that card to more than makes up for this. Though this card does not send a card to the graveyard like the others, no, it goes back into the deck. Now granted, in an era dominated by Witch, Sangan and the floaters like Tomato, this wasn't as bad if you were hit by a monster, but if this hit a back row like Mirror Force, good luck getting that card back unless you're at the heart of the card's level of card draw. Basically, unlike Duo and Confiscation, Sentry is the only card in the game that in some cases can permanently remove a card from the game, and thus it is the only one of these three cards that has never been unbanned, and with good blooming reason. The other half of the Tax Burn Rogue deck from GOAT format. Pretty much everything I said about Toll earlier also applies here, the only difference being it burns whenever a card is summoned or activated in hand rather than on attack. That being said, am I the only one who thinks that this ad doesn't really fit a taxation effect, and with more a hallmark on a removal effect or spellbinding circle-like effect? Just food for thought. Anyway, it's a decent card like Toll in the said burn deck, but no real use anywhere else. Next. Much like Upstart Goblin, this next card is another example of a powerful card from this set that was not game-warpingly broken. It's good old Mystical Space Typhoon or MST. As simple as effects come, this card at quick play speed can pop one back row on the field. A staple of Yu-Gi-Oh for many years, honestly many decks were still playing this card till Twin Twister came out. MST saw the most play during the GOAT era, as swiping a powerful one-of, like Mirror Force, could be crippling to decks like GOAT Control. What makes Typhoon so good is the amount of different ways it can give you advantage for no cost, from clearing the way for attacks, to sniping back row before it can be activated, to preventing effects from field and continuous spells from going off. This card could do a lot in its era, which is why it was limited for so long, and even today can still be cited on occasions. I know this isn't a very long entry, but this card is the perfect example of simplicity and kind design working out. Okay, let's clear this up before we go any further. Trunade is not a real word. It's messed up using the romanization of tornado apparently. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, this card is bonkers. At least as good as Heavy Storm, and some might argue even better. You see, while Storm destroys all back row, Trunade bounces them all back to hand, something that in a vacuum sounds awful, but in reality often isn't any different, as decks that play this card will often only use it or Storm when they're going to go for the one-shot win. Decks like Cat Combo and Benkei OTK for example, aka decks people have begun to realise are actually very hard to beat in old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Now in formats where it's legal, this is usually all Trunade does. However, I generally argue that in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! This card being unbanned would be even worse than Heavy or Harpies, as nowadays it can be used to reset floodgates or other nasty trap cards that affect both players, something that's already been used for in Benkei OTK by bouncing the deck's limit area Bs and gravity binds, and as such, like many cards in this ill thought out set, I find it hard to see this card ever coming back. Speaking of which... well, here we have it. Not just the best card from this set, but in mine and many other Yu-Gi-Oh players' opinions, the strongest Yu-Gi-Oh card ever made. Painful Choice. The absolute best possible example of creators making a card with a seemingly balanced downside, not realising how broken it would be later on. Painful Choice at first glance seems fairly bad, as what it does is allow the user to pick 5 cards from their deck, show them to the opponent, and then they get to keep one of the opponent's choice, while sending the rest of them to the graveyard. So in theory, this card was meant to test how well the user could pick their 5 cards in a way that would give them a good card. Of course, in reality, in a game where the graveyard is essentially the second hand, what this card actually does is draw you 5 cards. And yes, it's absolutely as brutal as it sounds. Now I'm sure you can immediately think of hundreds of ways this card would be broken in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! But even in the slow as hell days of early Yu-Gi-Oh! People realised how good this card was, particularly in Chaos decks, as you could dump 2 Darks and Lights with this card to at minimum guarantee a Chaos monster like CED, and sometimes you could get the full Yes a Lot combo with just this one card. As you can imagine, this card was banned fairly quickly into the ban list life cycle, and this is one card that I can say with 100% certainty will never return. Because if Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever gets to the point where this card is actually able to come back, we'll likely see a hard reset of the game. Well, that's enough of broken cards, let's get back to talking shittiness with Snake Fang, a normal trap who's only effective to reduce the defense points of a monster by 500, which sure could have a beatdown deck back in 2002 to take out a 2k wall, but it's so situational that no deck would ever actually run it. Next. Okay, was this card misprinted, never fixed or something? I ask this because this is a normal monster with 600 attack points that cost a tribute, in the same style as cards like Whiptail Crow. Nothing to say about this card, it's awful, but why on earth would you put this in a set full of normal monsters that could destroy it without needing a tribute? Next. Another pack filler vanilla that was bad even from memories. Next. Honestly, when it comes to the Horn of the Unicorn, pretty much everything I said about Malevolent Nuzzler also applies here, as it's also an equipment card that gives a 700 point buff, and it also returns to the top of the deck upon destruction. However, I'm sorry to say but Unicorn is worse in every way, as while it doesn't cost life points to return this card to the top of the deck, it's crucially also not optional. What were they thinking with that? That one change takes this card from a fringe at best card to one that is downright unplayable, as more often than not, if you lose the card this is equipped to, you're likely on the back foot, and drawing this card again 9 times out of 10 will not save you. Just an awfully designed card. Next. I decided to group these cards together as they were all played by the same duelist in the anime, all work together in combination, and are all equally bad. Labyrinth Wall is the best of the bunch, being a 3k wall that's strong defences undermined by the fact that no player with a brain were attacking to attribute set monster, whereas Magical Labyrinth and Wall Shadow are essentially just worst pseudo-ritual cards, with Shadow being a normal monster with OK stats that requires the spell, and Labyrinth Wall to summon him. And like most rituals in this set, this card is also unplayable. Next. Normal monster, weak stats, and a dirty sounding name. Nothing else to say? Next. It's Octoberzer, but Earth. Nothing else to say? Next. Okay, now on the surface, this card seems to have the same problem as a few other cards from this set, that being it's an okay answer to a very narrow problem, in this case being equipped monsters. However, given the power of equipped cards in this set, and the use of them in several decks in mid 2002 or 2003, this card honestly wouldn't have been a bad side deck option at the time, depending on the meta you were playing in. Now, I've got no proof that this card was ever used much back in the day, but unlike many cards here, I can at least see some uses for Eternal Rest, so that puts it above several other cards in this set. Next. Next up in this set's lineup, we have one of the first ever OTK enablers in Megamorph, a card that doubles your monster's attack points when you have less life than your opponent. While it does half the monster's points if you have more life than the opponent, that is really going to come up as most decks that play this competitively do so with the intent to win on the spot, most notably the dreaded Demise OTK deck, which used Demise King of Armageddon's effect to wipe the board for 2000 life points, and then use this card with Doom Dozer to OTK the opponent. Outside of this OTK deck, this card also saw play in the OCG alongside Cyberstein, as these two cards can make a 9k Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon turn 1, which back then could often be enough to win the game on the spot. But we in the TCG didn't get this combo, as Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon didn't come out until after Stein was already banned, although some players did a similar play with Cyber Twin Dragon back in the day. Up next, I'm grouping several cards together. It's all of this set's ritual monsters other than Relinquished. And the reason I'm grouping these all together is because, other than Relinquished, they're all horrible! You see, the thing with ritual spells is you're supposed to use the ritual card to summon the monster by using monsters of the same stars as tributes, basically making them tribute monsters that are more hard to summon. So, are these cards balanced for that cost? Are they more powerful to be worth playing on these cards? Other than Relinquished? Nope. In fact, most of these cards are actually underpowered for their levels if they were regular tribute monsters, so making you use a ritual to get them out is insulting. From cards like Dances with Swords with 1950 attack for level 6, to Crab Turtle being a 2550 monster for level 8, these cards wouldn't be good if they were just tribute monsters, and the fact that you need a ritual for them is downright insulting. Next. Again grouping these two cards together, as they are both trap cards that are terrible for the same reason. You see, both these cards destroy a monster in theory on summon, like Trap Hole. However, the card pool for both was so small that there wasn't play any of them over Trap Hole or Fissure. With House destroying a monster with 400 or less defense, while each Gaboon killed one with 500 or less attack points. Honestly, I can't think of any good cards at the time these two could have hit, as the shame coming with such cool art like the House is on such an awful card. Same as Red Archery Girl, the only thing notable about this card is its toon version. Next. So this card is basically just a Monitor bug, but slow as hell. A flip monster, Jigen Bakudan, not only has to remain on the field once flipped to destroy a monster, but it can't even do it till the next turn standby phase, which is so slow. Yes, it also burns the opponent when it destroys the monster, making this technically the first Ring of Destruction-like effect. But honestly, why would you even run this card when you just play Monitor bug and just desserts together? Next. It's Blue Eyes White Dragon's awkward cousin that costs the same amount of tribute as the Blue Eyes, but with far worse stats. At best, this card could have been an okay fourth target for flip summoning dragons in early Blue Eyes decks, but assuming you're even playing that awful deck in 2002, why run this with a Tri-Horn Dragon? Otherwise, I can see no use for this card. Next. The only card in Yu-Gi-Oh! History that has no effect, just a cost for 1000 life points to play. Toon World's only use is obviously to bring out the Toon cards, and to be the final card searched by table of contents in library FTK decks. Otherwise, nothing else to say about this card other than the cool artwork. Next. Up next we have not only one of the most powerful monsters in this set, but also one of the longest banned in Cyberjar. A flip monster, Cyberjar is extremely powerful because it has not one but two broken effects attached to it upon flip, being both a Dark Hole and a Morphing Jar as a weapon at the opponent's field and then allow both players to draw 5 cards. However, in addition to this, it will also force both players to summon or set any monsters they draw that can be summoned or set, easily rebuilding your own board and possibly giving you more advantage than your opponent if you're lucky. Now, I think about board wipes that draw you 5 cards are good for obvious reasons, but you may be surprised how good the summon effect is, as essentially it is symmetrical in theory and can benefit the opponent if you're not lucky, but despite this it can also potentially put you miles ahead of an opponent if you're the lucky one, and in the infamous empty jar combo it helps quickly empty the opponent's deck for the deck's deck out win condition. Another card from this set was banned for many years due to its power in GOAT format. Jar doesn't see much played these days, but the fear and respect it commands from old school players makes it one of the best monsters to come out of this set. We all know how powerful and potentially game-warping cards like D-Shifter, Macrocosmo and D-Fisher can be in modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, with them making decks like Flwandereeze, Exorcister and Kashtira extremely powerful. But did you know the first version of this card's effect came in Spell Ruler? That's right, meet Banisher of Light, a 100 attack 2k defense monster that while faced upon the field banishes any card that hits the graveyard. Like the other cards I mentioned, this card can be game winning against certain decks, and also he isn't hard to get out with cards like Shining Angel in this set, and in present day you can get him out with Mankin Cat. But there's also a reason this card isn't well known as his peers, and that's because he's by far the easiest version of this effect to out, with him being a weak monster with no protection, meaning most decks can either run him over in battle or remove him with effects for minimal card loss, making him by far the weakest option compared to his alternatives. In addition to this, the biggest problem with this card is he has to be face up to do this effect, so you have to either set him and hope he gets attacked, or play him in attack mode and hope he survives a turn, neither of which is very likely. So in conclusion, this card's design was definitely an influential card, but sadly only worked so the other cards could run and hit the opponent in the knee with a crowbar. Next. Up next, we are once more going to cover a bunch of similar cards in one entry, with the attribute searching floaters from this set, aka Mystic Tomato, Shining Angel, UFO Turtle, Giant Rat, Mother Grizzly and Flying Kamakuri No. 1, all of which have the same effect that when they're destroyed by battle, they can summon a monster they share an attribute with that 1500 or less attack, which yes does mean you can cycle through 3 of them and thin your deck in solo formats like Goat and Edison. However, most of the time you'll be using these cards to get some of the best cards of their attributes released at the time, with with Tomato and Angel being the most prominent, seen playing GOAT's best deck, Chaos, as ways of both filling the grave with lights and darks, and getting powerful cards like DD Warrior Lady and Spirit Reaper onto the board. In addition to this, Tomato itself was also part of a toolbox deck called Tomato Control, and Giant Rat saw play in Earth aggro decks, and even saw play late 2012 in Jeff Jones' Psychic deck. Finally, Stunning Angel also currently sees play in Edison format in the recently discovered Fairies deck, as a way of searching powerful cards like Dimensional Alchemist and the Herald monsters, among other cards. Also, the other cards in this type saw Fringe play as well, with Mother Grizzly seen play in Water aggro decks, and UFO Turtle seen play in Fire Heavier Burn decks, respectively. So it's safe to say that these cards were a cornerstone of early Yu-Gi-Oh! And some of the most powerful cards in the game until it got too quick for them. Another excellent example of powerful, non-broken cards from this usually OP set. This card searches any ritual monster upon summoning, making one of the broadest searches in the game's history, and didn't see much meta play until 2014, just to give you an idea of how bad rituals were for a long time. That being said, this card has seen a lot of meta play since then, most notably in Necros decks, as both a way of searching your Necros monsters, and as a monster to tribute off to some of the most powerful Necros card, Unicorn. Has also seen play in Relinquish decks and GOAT occasionally, as a light Chaos target, and in some rogue decks like Chaos Max Blue Eyes. Not bad for a card from 2002, but god, it'd take a while for this card to get good. Up next, we have the beginning of what I call the Shit MRL Beaters trilogy, aka monsters with high stats that have such crippling downsides the stats don't matter in the slightest. The first of which being Flash Assailant, probably the best of the three, which is really sad. A 2000 attack point monster which sounds good for the time. Unfortunately, it also has the slight downside of losing 400 points for every card in your hand, meaning you need to be hellbent for this card to be any good at all. I hope I'm going to explain why this is so bad, right? Sure, some aggro decks can empty their hands fairly early and maybe make this card big, but there's so many better options to play, there's no reason to have ever run this. Up next we have Karate Man, a 1000 attack monster that can double his attack points to 2000 at the cost of destroying himself at the end phase. So you could play this one-time beater, or you could play Legion, Battleox, even Ryukushin. Sure, they got less points, but at least they stick around and can do a lot more damage in the long term. Yes, this card could be used with supply squad-like effects to draw cards or gain other effects, but that's so narrow it's really not worth it just for that. Next. Next up in the trilogy of MRL shitty beaters, we got Dark Zebra. Another bad beater, outshined by starter deck cards. Dark Zebra has the same attack stats as Legion, but lower defense, and also an awful effect that strands it in defense mode only 400 points if it's ever alone on the field. So again, why don't I just play Legion if I want a good beater? Next. Okay, now we've got an interesting card, a burn monster that requires battling to get its burn damage. It's Giant Germ. A 1000 attack fiend, Germ upon destruction summons 2 more copies of itself from the deck, and then burns the opponent for 500, meaning that one of these cards can burn the opponent for 1500 over the course of 2 to 3 turns, and much like another card will get you momentarily with life gain. However, unlike that card, Germ actually makes the game go faster, not agonizingly slow, so I'll allow it. Now, as this card has to be disrupted at battle to get its effect, it's not a staple in GOAT format burn decks, but some have teched it in as a way of both burning and thinning the deck. God, I hate this little shit! Yes, I know the Woman Manga isn't a very powerful card, all things considered, as all it does is summon more copies of itself on destruction, and give us a controller 1000 life point buff, but god did I hate this card as a kid, because in every Game Boy Advance game I ever played with Yu-Gi-Oh! It was always guaranteed that Tay would play at least 3 of this card, which between 3000 point life gain and the 2 extra bodies would make a game that I was almost guaranteed to win take at least 3 extra turns. As for the actual game, the only noteworthy thing about this card is with the introduction of the Nimble cards, those also contain Beaver and Angler that would dominate the game in 2020's sprites. Other than that, there's nothing else to say about this card other than it's just annoying! Next! Well, with Jig and Bakudan, we've got the world's worst Maida bugs. How about the world's worst monster reborn? It's Spear Cretin. A 500 attack and defense flip monster, Cretin upon flip essentially acts like the Shallow Grave, allowing both players to summon a monster in either face down defense position or face attack position. However, the problem here is, unlike Shallow Grave, which has its uses in decks like Empty Jar, Crescent takes up a summon, meaning you can't even use it in flip combo decks, as you can't play it and a Jar on the same turn, so all you're really left with is a Monster Reborn that helps your opponent as much as you. Yeah, I'll stick to Monster Reborn and Premature Burial in my goat decks, thank you very much. And up next we got some grade A pig shit. It's Boar Soldier, the worst bad beater in this set, which given the quality of cards like Dark Zebra and Flash Assailant is saying a lot. But why is this 2k 4-star card bad, you ask? Well, how about the fact that if you summon this card in attack position, it just dies? Yeah, okay, but if you set it and then flip it next turn, sure you get a 2k beater then, right? Well, if your opponent's field is empty, sure. Otherwise, you just wasted 2 turns to summon a 1000 attack Essential Vanilla. I'm not going to even dignify this card with any more speech. Next. Ah, a Secret Spicy Tech versus Vanquished Soul? No, not really, but Ceremonial Bell did have okay defense points for its error, and there are many cards that do require you to reveal cards in your hand to work, which this card does shut down. Again though, like most bad cards in the set, it's just too specific to be useful. Still, it would be funny to Mannequin Cat this out versus Vanquished Soul, or some other way of getting it out. And if someone can pull that off, let me know. Pretty much the same as Manju, only it searches ritual spells as opposed to monsters, Sonic Burst still didn't see anywhere near as much play as his many limbed counterpart, due to 1. Dex not wanting to play many normal summons by the 10 rituals were actually viable, and 2. There'd be much better ways to add ritual spells from deck to hand when rituals were finally viable in 2014. Nothing else to say here, it's just a powerful search effect like Manju, but sadly unlike Manju, Power Creep clipped this bird's wings before he come any use. Another example of this set's strange habit of oddly specific removal effects, Kotodama is a monster that will automatically destroy any monster on the field that shares a name, making it both a removal and a floodgate, as will only destroy the newest of the 2 monsters when they're summoned, essentially giving all Yugioh monsters Magic's legend rule pre-2010. And yet it's still bad for the same reason other specific removal cards from this set are bad. It's too narrow, as you not only have to have an opponent play 2 copies of a card on the same field, or else share a monster with you, but you also need to keep the 0 attack, 1600 defense monster alive for a while to get the full benefits of this effect, which is not very likely to happen. Next. Once again with this entry we have multiple cards which I call the background field spells. I call them that because look how beautiful all their art is. These cards look so nice, I've actually used their art in many of my videos as backgrounds, they're that pretty. But you're not here for art appreciation, so how good were these cards in the actual game? Well, each of them give a card of a specific type a 500 point attack boost and a 400 point defense decrease. So the ones that have seen the most play, namely the Earth one, Gaia Power, are the ones used in beatdown strategies, with Earth being the strongest with aggro decks like Earth Beatdown and Beast Down, with most of the others rarely coming up. So in conclusion, Gaia Power is a good old school field spell, but all of its contemporaries make for amazing background and art pieces, and not much else I'm afraid. And now we come to a really special card. You see, most of the time when a card is as annoying as hell to go against, it tends to only ruin one format, as often either banned quickly or falls out of favour. However, Messenger of Peace, ironically named, this card from what I've seen only causes violence, has been a pain in the ass twice over 2 different decades. Firstly, in stall burn strategies they use this card as well as level limit area B and Gravity Bind, and secondly in the 2020s as part of the most obnoxious deck in Master Duel, Runic Stun, which aims to use this card to lock down the board alongside cards like Teak-Boo and Rivalry, and then mill the opponent out with runic spells. So as you can see, there is no fun way to play this card, as it only exists to make one player not play the game. Yes, this card technically has a maintenance cost of 100 life points a turn, but come on, when is that ever likely to be relevant? I was shocked when I saw this card make a return in the 2020s, and I sincerely hope I never have to see it again. And finally, our search for a good secret rare continues. As we conclude this set, we have Serpent Knight Dragon, a card with admittedly good artwork, but is sadly just a vanilla monster with low points for its level that never saw any play, even in Lord of D flute decks. Maybe next time, everybody. And that's Spell Ruler, one of, in my view, the best sets in Yu-Gi-Oh history. With 10 cards perma-banned in the TCG pretty much, and many more cards that have been staples for years, it's no exaggeration to say that few sets in the game's history have had such much of an impact. Thank you all for watching, and join me next time when we look at spell ruler for trap cards in Pharaoh's Servant.